So, sir, a very hot topic. We already had a very candid discussion right now. But just to set the context, you all are scientists and you all understand the subject far more, from a holistic point of view rather than strictly a point-to-point solution point of view. Life on our planet has been coexistence with the wildlife. Humans have interacted with wildlife forever, since time immemorial. But of late, this interaction has turned more into conflict. What are the reasons for this? Aritra, let's begin with you. What is the reason why this interaction is turned into conflict and not so much coexistence? Over to you.
So firstly, I would like to thank the previous speakers for setting the context beautifully for the discussions that are going to follow. In terms of looking at the drivers of conflict, that is damages that wildlife cause to human society and also vice versa, I would primarily look at them to be of three sorts: the economic aspects, the social aspects, and the ecological aspects. The economic drivers are actual losses that local communities face due to damages due to wildlife, such as elephants, wild pigs, large carnivores, tigers, leopards, and so on. And there are also transaction costs that these communities bear when they have to access compensation or any other relief from the government. There are also opportunity costs that these communities bear when they lose their livestock and property. The other aspect is the social side, where, as you said, why are we moving from coexistence to conflict through time? And I think that's because a lot of our traditional social values are changing over time due to societal changes, natural transition in human societies. And also, the high quantum of losses that the societies are facing is sort of tipping the scales in the favor of conflict from coexistence. So that's something that has to be looked at very carefully. And I think the third and often underlooked aspect is the way that wildlife is also adapting to sharing space with people. Elephants, leopards, and other species, they are known to modify their own behavior to be able to capitalize human sources of food like crops and livestock and so on. So I think it's a combination of these three primary drivers that are behind the escalating trends of conflict that we see today.
Ravi, sir, what is the role of wildlife corridors and the buffer zones? They are critical. What are we doing? Are we doing enough to conserve them?
Conservation cannot be restricted just to the limits of our protected area. We have to take a landscape approach. The average size of our protected area are too small to hold viable populations of most of our large mammal species. Unfortunately, post-1990, with economic liberalization, it's been as if wildlife has to know its boundaries and stay within the park, and anything outside is free rein for us to exploit. And that is coming back to bite us now. Corridors are, because we have constricted or destroyed habitat, then it becomes a narrow connectivity. Otherwise, earlier animals had free range. So in the change scenario, corridors have to be as sacrosanct as your protected area if you want long-term viability of any of our species. The fact is, for many species, up to 50, even 60% of our populations are not within protected areas. They are either in reserve forest or in human-dominated habitat. Lions are a good example. You come from Gujarat, you know what the story there is. So, to think of conservation purely from a PA-centric lens is a very limited approach, which is bound to fail in the long term, especially with rapidly changing climate. We don't know what it is going to have impact on habitats and where animals will be able to find the kind of resources and suitable habitat. So, buffer zones for protected areas, ensuring connectivity, restoring connectivity, because most of our habitats are also degraded. Invasive alien species have taken over large swaths. So on paper it might look all great. You go and step into the forest, you really know what is the quality of the existing habitat. Animals are not able to meet their needs within. And to me, ecological restoration is real development. It's not a luxury. It's not a desire. I mean, it's not something which is optional anymore. Because ecological restoration means not just biodiversity conservation, which will result in reducing conflict, which will result in mitigating climate change. There are far more benefits, and local people will benefit from it, not just from employment, but from the resources that become available to them.
Subhash sir, how do you reflect on this, the significance of wildlife corridors, especially from the government conservation perspective?
See, if we look at the conflict per se, so there are several species that are involved in conflict. And what Ravi has said, as well as our other panelist has said, is absolutely right. When we deal with a conflict area, there are several factors that need to be taken into care, whether it is habitat management, whether it is corridors, or any other part. Now, as a manager of a conflict situation, when I sit in the seat of Chief Wildlife Warden, blaming Forest Department to take care of all wild animals is also not a right thing. When we deal with wild animals, we are dealing with another species. And this is basically what we are seeing. It is the interspecies conflict that we see, and human beings, being at the apex, think that all other species are inferior to them. If we take equality within the species, then this conflict situation itself will not arise. If you take example of, I will not take example of elephant because everyone is speaking of elephant. Now leopards, if you take, there are at least, even if you take a ballpoint figure of 2,500 leopards in Karnataka, almost 30% have never seen the forest. They are all in the outside landscapes where human beings are there, including in Bengaluru city. Now, unless we try to coexist with leopards, we will be only facing conflicts. We have spread our apartments and our living spaces. Almost now we are touched Bannerghatta.
Right.
If you go 25 years back, after Dairy Circle, there was hardly any habitation. If we go by that kind of a logic, leopards were already there. Now we have gone and made apartments, and in CCTV, when we see a leopard, we get panicked. That's not the way we need to behave with the animals. So coexistence has to be there, whether it is in forested areas. Corridors is right, but corridors is not the only way by which we can do existing habitat improvement, as well as where we have faced maximum problem is with the new irrigation facilities, the cropping pattern has changed drastically.
Yeah.
So where there were dryland agriculture, the elephants, even if they move from one place to another, it is to just get damaged by trampling or other things. But now with a very good, it is like adolescent kids going to Pizza Hut to eat outside their home food. So like that, they come to eat banana as well as areca nut or any other food that is available. And most of these are all adolescent male bulls, that is tuskers and magnas. So this kind of things are happening. We are changing our life pattern. So animals are also modifying their behavior.
Right. Yes, Aritra, one of the biggest concerns or rather points of conflict also of late is the role of local communities and the fact that these areas are populated, but also they are the people of that place. How do we deal with that? Are they a part of the problem or are they a part of the solution?
So I sincerely believe if any conservation efforts have to be sustained, the local communities have to be taken into confidence. They have to be at the center stage because these are the people who are actually sharing space with all the wildlife and also bearing the brunt of wildlife conservation goals. People from the city are enjoying some safaris in Kabini and all these beautiful places, but the same elephants are coming out in the fringes and raiding the crop fields, and then the local communities are bearing the brunt. And I think there is good example in place, especially in Karnataka, where a lot of compensation-based processes have been digitized so that people are able to effectively gain compensation for losses. So overall, in terms of both local forest governance, human-wildlife conflict management, and improving biodiversity in a particular landscape, the local communities have to be taken, at the center stage, I believe. Thanks.
Subhash sir, how do you reflect on that? What is Karnataka state's approach been?
In Karnataka, whatever we have taken up, I would certainly give a lot of credit to the local communities. Whatever actions we have taken, whether we put elephant task force or we put leopard task force or we make RRTs, we create advanced alert systems, mass SMS systems, all these are the things that are being done by Forest Department. But the people listening to it and trying to modify their own ways of living, because I will tell you, when there is a strife and where there are elephants within your coffee estate, it is very difficult to live in that estate. So despite of that, I would rather say that people of Karnataka are the greatest conservationists, because it is not one who is sitting in Bangalore. The conservationists are one who are dealing with it on day-to-day basis, facing the problem but still living with it. I think all the people who are in this man-animal conflict zone, they are the true conservationists, not the ones whom we are sitting here.
Chellam sir, training is maybe not the right word, but how to equip people who are living in these areas. What is being done? And are there any good practices that has come to your notice that you would like to say that, okay, this needs to be done to equip people living in these areas to deal with presence of wildlife?
No, it's strange that we talk of equipping people who over generations actually lived with wildlife. It's more that we need to understand what their traditional practices are and see how our modern management interventions can be in sync with them. Right now, by and large, not just specifically in Karnataka, wildlife policy making is very top-down. And unfortunately, an enabling legislation called the Forest Rights Act is seen as anti-conservation. That's something that actually strengthens the local people and will, there are very, very enabling conservation provisions in the Forest Rights Act, which need to be, so if you bring them on board, give them the ownership, really give them the powers to decide at the local level, I think a lot more can be got. Today, we are a very barrier-centric management. It's a civil engineering approach to what is essentially an ecological and sociological issue. And unless we bring ecology right and center, and the rights of the local people right and center, this is a losing battle. Because we are really not using the knowledge that we have. India is a leading country today in wildlife research. And traditionally, since centuries people have lived with animals, there is that lived experience and knowledge. We really need to draw on that, tap on that, use the enabling provisions of the Forest Rights Act. Then I think it's all about language. We call destroying of nature development, right? And we say wildlife is straying. Who is straying? We are straying. Wildlife is not straying. Wildlife doesn't need traffic sign to tell which is the right way to go, it is a no entry or it should stop, right? So all of that we need. If language changes, attitude will change. If attitude changes, success is assured.
Right. It is so correct. At the outset, I said, looking at a holistic approach rather than a short-term solution. Aritra, let's talk about specifically Karnataka. We are seeing a lot of elephant conflicts are rising, and a lot of elephants are coming out of the forest. Why do you reckon is that happening?
So the situation is not specific to Karnataka, actually. There are multiple states which have facing serious losses, damages due to elephants. Also, elephants as a species are expanding and shifting their range in India. States like MP, Chhattisgarh, which do not have elephants for the last 100 years, elephants are coming back there. Karnataka also, there are new areas within the state where elephants did not used to go, as Malkhede sir said, due to the allure of agriculture, irrigated agriculture, right, which they are getting easy food. So on one hand, they are being allured through crops, which they can eat easily with minimum interference. The other side, I think it was covered in the previous panel, is the issue of invasive, which are degrading habitats. Issues like monoculture, where teak, as rightly said in the previous panel, they have something called allelopathy, which means they don't allow other species to generate where monoculture exists. So those kind of sort of policies and climate-induced invasives have degraded these habitats. So elephants are pushed from the native habitats on one side, and also they are allured into these novel habitats to the attraction of crops.
Right. Sir, Subhash sir, how do you reflect on that?
See, the measures that we take in this straying elephants, which we are finding, since we are talking about elephants, the thing is that elephant population is growing, and whatever habitat has been there, it is fragmented due to various reasons. It's not that But despite of that, what we need to do at this point of time is that what we are taking is a measure by which elephants don't come out of the forest. But then there are so many other things which need to be done when we are dealing with elephant conflict. Now, I would certainly compliment our political will and all the 4 panelists who were there. They have been highly supportive of us, because when there is a conflict, the major problem that we face is, in fact, not the problem of elephant or problem of human beings per se, but it is a problem of law and order. At such point of times, I think the whole administration needs to be in focus, which we are trying to do it in Karnataka. And also, as Ravi was telling, there is something, not only the Forest Rights Act, I would say there has to be a lot of legislative changes that are required even in Wildlife Act. Now, certain provisions of Wildlife Act, they restrict state governments from taking any further action. The conflicts need to be tackled. Earlier, elephants were caught for so many things. Like, say, Maharajas used to take them, Khedda operation was there. Today, we don't do anything of that sort. So, population will certainly rise. When such population rise is there, what kind of actions that as managers or the people who take care of certain things and to reduce the conflict, what further legislative actions are required should be left to state at certain point of time, and Chief Wildlife Warden should be empowered to take certain decisions which are in the larger interest of human beings as well as in the interest of animals too, wild animals too. Thank you.
Right, sir. Ravi sir, at an individual level, what can we do? When you're right about, urban people enjoy safaris and it's the rest, but it's not as simple as that. I mean, there are also people who will need to deal with it, and so how do we, at an individual level, get ready for it? Because leopards are not, something that will happen to distant people in the villages only. It is something very in front of us.
The first and foremost thing is to, as the Chief Wildlife Warden said earlier, to understand that humans are not some special creature, that we are a part of nature. As long as we don't just only prioritize human well-being, because without nature, without environment, what is human well-being? Where is today clean air, clean water? I mean, I grew up in a situation where bottled water I used to see on television when Wimbledon tennis match used to come. India did not have bottled water. Today, without bottled water, we don't seem to be able to survive, at least in cities. Is that development? I mean, that's the kind of question each of us need to ask ourselves. Forget asking the government or the corporate sector. Each of us both has a role and has an impact. And the impact is often a negative impact. How can we cut back on consumption? And what is our definition of a good life? And what is the earth, the planet we want to leave behind? All of our time is limited. But today the crisis is all coming, and we really have a short time window. I mean, internationally they say 2030 is a very important kind of a deadline. Yeah. So there's no time to lose.
Yes, yes. Aritra, a closing remark by you. Very quick one.
Yeah, I think the basic premise that we need to establish here at such forums is that our ecology and economy are very delicately and very intricately intertwined. And how we treat the former will affect the latter very devastatingly. The other thing I wanted to say is that India presents a situation not only of conflict. It's a country where 17% of the world's human population is sharing space with 60% of the world's Asian elephants, about 60% of the world's tigers also. More?
75%.
And in 2.5% of the land terrestrial area. Yeah. There is something right that's going on in India, which has to be celebrated and acknowledged. And absolutely. And lions. And I think not only conflict, coexistence needs to be the new normal. It has always been traditionally the normal for us. And that will lead the way for the economic and ecological security for our country into the future. Thanks.
Right, sir. Subhash, sir.
I think only 2 points I want to make. What Ravi said, if we are drinking water from a stream in a forest, that has got no value. If you drink by bottle, it adds to the GDP. Unless we take ecological services as economic services, we will not be able to tackle any problem, leave alone human-animal problem. And the second thing is, I think what our friend was telling, unless we learn to coexist with the animals, wild animals, we will see that we ourselves might not exist in future. Thank you.
That's a very important and powerful point. Thank you very much, panelists. With this, we come to an end of this session.